Good morning, friends. I am Captain Dr. D.K. Ramawat, working as a consultant cardiologist since 20 years at Ramawat Heart and General Medicine Hospital, Barmer, Rajasthan, India. Today, we are taking a very important topic, the diabetes and cardiovascular disease in India. And for this, we are taking newer management of the diabetes from glucocentric to patient-centric. It is very important to understand and listen. I am sure you will enjoy it and understand it. So let us come to discuss diabetes. So we are going to discuss diabetes and cardiovascular diseases in India regarding introduction. In the new millennium era, cardiovascular diseases have become the leading cause of morbidity and mortality across the globe and in the Indian subcontinent. An estimated 250 million adults suffer from diabetes mellitus worldwide and poised to increase to 642 million by 2040. India, with 69 million individuals already affected by diabetes mellitus. It has been observed natives of the Asian countries are affected by diabetes in higher proportion when compared with the rest of the world. The prevalence of the diabetes in Asian Indians occurred 10 years earlier in comparison to individuals of Japanese and Chinese origin. Even migrant Asian Indians show a higher prevalence of diabetes compared to natives. There is an increased risk and premature CVD among South Asian immigrants compared to other ethnic groups. Now regarding second point, epidemiology. Approximately a quarter of all deaths in India are attributable to CVD as suggested by the Global Burden of the Disease study. These two, ISD and cerebrovascular accidents, accounts for 1/10 of the years of the life lost, means number of years of the life lost due to the premature death. Indians are affected with CVD at least a decade earlier at the height of their most productive midlife years as compared to the Europeans. The various risk factors and their associations with CVD as evaluated by the Inter-Heart study are as follows. Number 1, diabetes a risk factor. Second, increased high waist hip ratio a risk factor. Third, hypertension a risk factor. Fourth, increased ApoB100 and ApoA1 ratio a risk factor. Now, in epidemiology we are going, 62 Indians suffered from diabetes, while another 77 million had pre-diabetes, means impaired fasting glucose and or impaired glucose tolerance. Then the cardiovascular disease being the major cause of morbidity and mortality in patients with diabetes. A large proportion of Indians are thus at substantially high risk of death from macrovascular diseases, for example, heart attack, stroke, and peripheral vascular diseases. Then the fibrocalculous pancreatic diabetes, FCPD, an atypical form of diabetes secondary to a variety of chronic calcific pancreatitis, is mostly observed in the southern state of India. In these subsets of the patients, microvascular complications, which include the damage to eyes causing retinopathy leading to blindness, in the kidney causing nephropathy leading to renal failure, and to the nerves neuropathy leading to impotency and diabetic foot disorder, which include severe infections leading to amputation. The capture cross-sectional study, what we have learned, 1 out of the 3 of all people living with type 2 diabetes have established CVD. Then 2 out of 10, less than 1 in 4 people are being treated with glucose-lowering drugs with proven cardiovascular benefit. Now the third heading, risk factors for cardiovascular diseases in India. Number 1, dysglycemia, and second will be dyslipidemia. Don't confuse, these are two different things. Dysglycemia and dyslipidemia. Dysglycemia means either low blood sugar or high blood sugar. It is a risk factor for CVD in India. Second, dyslipidemia, a risk factor for CVD in India. The ICMR India study reported 72.3% of Indians have low level of HDL cholesterol, which is a good cholesterol. Then 29.5% have hypertriglyceridemia, bad cholesterol. Then 13.9% have hypercholesterolemia, bad cholesterol. Then 1.8% have elevated level of LDL cholesterol, a bad cholesterol. Then third risk factor, hypertension. Fourth risk factor, sedentary lifestyle. And fifth, tobacco use. Then sixth, dietary habits. In dietary habits, we will take the first point, the National Family Health Survey 3, involving 1,56,316 individuals, reported that almost half of the population in its survey consumed only 1 serving of fruits per week or none at all. Second point in dietary, the Inter-Heart study revealed that Asian Indians had a lower daily intake of fruits and vegetables in comparison to non-Asian counterparts. Third point in diet, meals are overcooked and loss of vital micronutrients. Fourth point in diet of Asian Indians rich in saturated fatty acids and rich in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids and rich in trans fatty acids with low level of protective omega-3. Protective omega-3, they are deficient in this. That unfortunately we eat too much omega-6. Too much omega-6 can raise your blood pressure, lead to blood clots, which can cause what? Number 1, heart attack. Number 2, stroke. And number 3, cause your body to retain water. Then the seventh is factor, thrifty phenotype hypothesis and Barker hypothesis. Thrifty phenotype hypothesis, poor fetal and infant growth and the subsequent development of type 2 diabetes and the metabolic syndrome results from effects of poor nutrition in early life, which produces permanent changes in glucose-insulin metabolism. Then Barker hypothesis proposed that adverse nutrition in early life, including prenatally, means in the uterus, as measured by low birth weight and short birth length. Again I repeat, low birth weight and short birth length, that is thrifty gene hypothesis. And second, increased susceptibility to the metabolic syndrome. The eighth risk factor, epigenetic and genetic risk factor, genome-wide association study evaluating population-specific genetic and epigenetic factors predisposing Asian susceptibility, loci, and they identified in a genome-wide association study conducted on Asian Indian individuals in type 2 diabetes mellitus. Then the ninth risk factor. Now we are coming to the fourth main heading, that is screening and prevention of the diabetes risk factor. How we can prevent these risk factors and how we can screen. Number one, lifestyle modification for prevention of diabetes risk factor is very important. There is compelling evidence to support that lifestyle modification not only prevents diabetes but also significantly improves glycemic control and reduces CVD risk. Second, prevention. Dietary management aims at achieving and maintaining an ideal body weight and a desirable lipid profile. And third, a euglycemic state, eventually preventing both macrovascular, means heart attack, stroke and peripheral vascular diseases, and microvascular, that is retinopathy, nephropathy and neuropathy complications related to diabetes are prevented. Now I will go to the pharmacotherapy. In this I will take first point, what is the role of HbA1c in diagnosis. The term A1c refers to glycosylated hemoglobin. It develops when hemoglobin, a protein within red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout your body, join with glucose in the blood and become glycosylated. Now A1c can indicate people with normal or pre-diabetes or diabetes. Number one, suppose A1c having normal, then A1c percentage will be below 6%, and in that case fasting plasma sugar will be 100 to 120 milligram, and 2 hours after glucose load the sugar will be less than 140 milligram percent. And if A1c having pre-diabetes, in pre-diabetes means impaired glucose tolerance, in A1c happens, then here A1c will be 6 to 6.4%. That was in the normal 6%, and pre-diabetes means impaired glucose tolerance, A1c will be 6 to 6.4%. And here fasting plasma sugar will be 120 to 125 milligram percent. And 2 hours after glucose load, here the blood sugar will be more than 140 to 199%. And in diabetes, A1c will be 6.5% or over. And here fasting plasma sugar will be 126 milligram or over. And 2 hours after glucose load, it will be more than 200 milligram percent. Now A1c versus blood glucose. If A1c is 5%, then glucose level will be 90 milligram percent. If A1c is 10%, then glucose level will be 240 milligram. If A1c is 11%, then glucose level will be 270 milligram percent. At this level, insulin therapy recommended. Now, treatment of diabetes mellitus. Initiation with a single oral anti-diabetic agent, upregulated to maximum tolerated dose before prescribing combination therapy is the standard approach. 2 landmark trials suggested that glycemic control is effective in reducing CV death. 2 landmark trials suggested that glycemic control is effective in reducing CV death in patients with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Two landmarks are as follows. Then diabetes mellitus is a strong risk factor for CAD complications and prognosis of atherosclerosis. Then diabetes has long been considered a CAD equivalent. Listen again, I repeat again, diabetes has long been considered a CAD equivalent. Hence there is need to educate physicians. Hence there is need to educate physicians to use multiple CVD risk reduction agents like antihypertensive and antiplatelet agents in CAD equivalent because they have an edge over the others. Now, 2005 ICMR guideline advocated use of anti-diabetic as follows. Number 1, a goal of glycosylated hemoglobin of 7% or less is recommended by 2005 ICMR guidelines. Second, a goal of A1C below 7% recommended by American Diabetes Association. Then third, a goal of A1C below 6.5% recommended by American Endocrine Diabetes Society. Now the second point, A1C less than 8% is appropriate in patients with advanced CAD, history of hypoglycemia and elderly patients. Third point, A1C if controlled more intensively, means less than 6%. If A1C if controlled more intensively, A1C if controlled more intensively, less than 6% can be harmful, as a CORD study showed increased cardiovascular mortality. Fourth point, A1C level more than 10 to 11% with hyperglycemia and glucotoxicity, insulin therapy recommended. And what are the symptoms of hyperglycemia? Slowly, they develop slowly over several days or weeks. The longer blood sugar level stay high, the more serious the symptoms become. Now, signs and symptoms of hyperglycemia: fruity smelling breath, nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath, dry mouth, weakness, abdominal pain, confusion and coma. Then we go to symptoms of glucotoxicity. What is glucotoxicity? Refers to the structural and functional damage in the beta cells and target tissues of the insulin caused by chronic hyperglycemia. These alterations cause a lower hormonal secretion of insulin, causing insulin resistance. In such situation, insulin therapy recommended. For BMI 25 kg per meter square. More, the 2005 ICMR guidelines advocated use of metformin tablet as first line therapy. And if BMI 18.6 to 24.9 kg per meter square, metformin is second line therapy because it can be controlled by diet and exercise only. Seventh point, initiate with single oral metformin therapy. Upregulated to maximum titrated dose is the standard approach before prescribing fixed dose combination therapy. The eighth point, the dipeptidyl peptidase DPP4 inhibitors called gliptins. For example, tinagliptin, alogliptin, sitagliptin, sitagliptin and vildagliptin are second line agents in almost all the guidelines. Then newer agent glucagon like peptide 1 agonist, receptor agonist, for example liraglutide, semaglutide, lixisenatide are superior in reducing CV events of diabetes mellitus. Then the 10th point, a new class of oral antidiabetic agent, sodium glucose co-transporter 2 inhibitor, for example empagliflozin, canagliflozin, and very important dapagliflozin, combined early with standard care, improved glycemic control and CV morbidity and mortality. The 11th point, American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association has suggested moderate to high intensity statin to reduce atherosclerotic CV risk. The prenofibrate should be used with high risk patients with increased triglycerides, that is more than 200 mg per deciliter, and low HDL means less than 34 mg per deciliter. If target LDL cholesterol value is not achieved below 70 mg or below 50% from baseline due to side effects of the statin, the ezetimibe may be added to lower dose of statin. Last but not the least, antihypertensive and antiplatelet agents are required because they have an edge over the others. Now we go to diabetic retinopathy. This is healthy eye, this is diabetic eye. Know your ABC. It is to protect your eye health. A1C, manage your blood glucose, have your A1C checked every 6 months. B, blood pressure, manage your blood pressure to protect your heart, kidney and eye health. C, cholesterol, manage your cholesterol levels. D, don't smoke, don't start smoking, and if you smoke, quit it. E, eyes, get a comprehensive dilated eye examination annually. Now, diabetic cardiomyopathy, very important complication of the diabetes. Every physician and cardiologist is supposed to know. Diabetic cardiomyopathy is a disorder of the heart muscle. In people with diabetes, it can lead to an inability of the heart to circulate blood through the body effectively, a state known as heart failure, with accumulation of fluid in the lungs called pulmonary edema, or accumulation of the fluid in legs called peripheral edema. Most heart failure in people with diabetes results from coronary artery disease and hypertension, and diabetic cardiomyopathy is only said to exist. Remember, diabetic cardiomyopathy is only said to exist if there is no coronary artery disease or there is no increased hypertension to explain the heart muscle disorder. Now we come to the signs and symptoms of dilated cardiomyopathy. Mild left ventricular diastolic dysfunction with little effect on ventricular filling. Second point, development of a combination of diastolic and systolic dysfunction that is preserved and reduced ejection fraction, indicating grade 4 diastolic dysfunction having a fixed and irreversible restrictive pattern by echocardiography. Third point, systolic mitral murmur, common due to mitral regurgitation due to ventricular enlargement and annular dilation. Then the fourth, latent progression, a prolonged QT interval. What indicate? Indicative of fibrosis, which exclude concomitant atherosclerosis or hypertension. The fifth, no change in myocardial perfusion or in atrial natriuretic peptide level seen until the very late stage of the disease, when the hypertrophy and fibrosis become very pronounced. Level of atrial natriuretic peptide secreted largely by the atrial myocardium in response to dilation of the heart. Atrial natriuretic peptide causes natriuresis, that is the accession of excessively large amount of sodium in the urine. Now the pathophysiology of diabetic cardiomyopathy. Diabetic cardiomyopathy is characterized functionally by ventricular dilation, ventricular enlargement, and enlargement of the heart cells, and prominent interstitial fibrosis, and lastly decrease or preserved systolic function in the presence of a diastolic dysfunction, that is combination of diastolic dysfunction and systolic dysfunction may occur. Grade 4 diastolic dysfunction seen, that is fixed and irreversible restrictive pattern by echocardiography. Now, the complications of diabetic cardiomyopathy. The main thing is the heart failure in diabetic cardiomyopathy. 4 main causes are responsible for development of the heart failure. Number 1, microangiopathy. Second, autonomic neuropathy. Third, metabolic alterations. And fourth, the last, generation and accumulation of free radicals. Now I would like to tell something about dilated cardiomyopathy. All the chambers are enlarged, massive global dilation and thinning of LV muscles. Massive global dilation and thinning of LV muscles simultaneously. LA also is dilated. There is extensive interstitial fibrosis, necrosis and atrophy of the myocardial cells, especially left ventricular subendocardial cells. Decreased or preserved systolic function, that is combination of diastolic dysfunction and systolic dysfunction may be seen. Grade 4 diastolic dysfunction with fixed and irreversible resting pattern by echo seen. This is the mitral inflow velocity, and when valocyanine was given or drugs like nitrate was given, it is not altered, no change in E velocities. So this is actually grade 4 diastolic dysfunction with fixed and irreversible resting pattern by echo. Now we come to a historical perspective. Diabetes drugs development. You see, before 1922, only diet in low carbohydrate and rich in fat was prescribed to the patients. But in 1922, it was before, in 1922 insulin came in the market. In 1955 sulfonylurea, all these came in the market, including glimepiride. Then in 2013 to 15, DDP4 inhibitor gliptins came in the market, these 4. Then in 2015, SGLT2 inhibitor, these 5 came in the market. Then in 2016, GLP-1 receptor agonist, these came in the market. These all are given subcutaneously except semaglutide, which is in pill form. This is in pill form. Simultaneously, glitazones, thiazolidinediones, TZD, these 2 came in the market. Now use of SGLT2 inhibitor and use of GLP-1 receptor agonist. None of the SGLT2 inhibitor individually is being used in more than 10% of the population. Only less than 10% of the population were receiving a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Now, how to define patients at risk? He may be at very high risk or moderate risk. European Society of Cardiology 2019 guidelines. CV risk categories in patients with diabetes. If there is very high risk, then patients with diabetes mellitus and established CVD. And there will be other target organ damage also. And there will be 3 or more major risk factors. And there will be early onset type 1 diabetes of long duration, that is more than 20 years. In high risk, patients with diabetes mellitus will be more than 10 years without target organ damage plus any other additional risk factor. In moderate risk, young patient with type 1 diabetes aged less than 35 years or type 2 diabetes aged less than 50 years with diabetes mellitus duration less than 10 years without other risk factors. And in 2019, American Diabetes Association and European Association for the Study of Diabetes consensus reported as follows: use metformin unless contraindicated or not tolerated. If indicators of high risk or established SCVD, CKD or heart failure, if there is risk of SCVD predominates, preferably use GLP-1 receptor agonist or SGLT2 inhibitors. Or if there is heart failure and CKD predominates, preferably use SGLT2 inhibitor or SGLT2 inhibitor not tolerated or contraindicated, then you can use GLP-1 receptor agonist. Now, European Society of Cardiology guidelines treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Type 2 diabetes mellitus treatment in inexperienced patients having SCVD or high or very high CV risk and target organ damage or multiple risk factors. So first you try SGLT2 inhibitor or GLP-1 receptor agonist monotherapy. If A1C remains above target by these two, then add the metformin. But remember, hypoglycemia risk may occur with SGLT2 inhibitor. Or you can start with the metformin monotherapy in these cases. And if A1C remains above target, then add either DPP-4 means gliptins or GLP-1 receptor agonist or SGLT2 inhibitor if GFR is adequate. So here GFR should be more than 45 ml per minute, remember. Or you can use TZD means thiazolidinediones or glitazones. You must know in established SCVD, indication of high SCVD risk are what? Age more than 55 years plus left ventricular hypertrophy or coronary artery diseases or carotid artery stenosis or lower extremity artery stenosis more than 50%. And in CKD, if you see specifically, GFR should be more than 30 to 60 ml per minute. And UACR, urine albumin clearance ratio, should be more than 30 milligram per gram, then we call CKD. Particularly urine albumin clearance ratio, if more than 300 milligram per gram, then it is considered CKD. And normal urine albumin creatinine ratio is less than 30 milligram per gram. Now we are going to American Diabetes Association and European Association for the Study of Diabetes, management of hyperglycemia in type 2 diabetes. First line therapy is metformin and comprehensive lifestyle changes including weight management and physical activity. Indications of high risk or established SCVD or CKD or heart failure found, consider independently of baseline A1C or individualized for A1C target. If SCVD predominates, means what? There is established SCVD or indications of high SCVD risk, means what? Age more than 55 years with coronary carotid or lower extremity artery stenosis more than 50%, or left ventricular hypertrophy present. Now preferably use what in these cases? GLP-1 receptor agonist with proven CVD benefit, or you can use SGLT2 inhibitor with proven CVD benefit if GFR is adequate, means here in this case GFR should be more than 45 ml per minute. Now if A1C is still above the target, then you go for further intensification be required, or patient is now unable to tolerate GLP-1 receptor agonist or SGLT2 inhibitor, choose agents demonstrating CV safety. For patient on GLP-1 receptor agonist, consider adding SGLT2 inhibitor with proven CVD benefits. So it is clear we can combine GLP-1 agonist with SGLT2 inhibitor, very important, you can combine. Then DPP-4 inhibitor you can use either this except sexagliptin because there is heart failure risk. But you have to remember here DPP-4 inhibitor can't be combined with GLP-1 receptor agonist because GLP-1 receptor agonist rapidly degraded by DPP-4. It is very important. Then you can also use basal cell insulin, but here you must remember risk of hypoglycemia with SGLT2 inhibitor. Then you can also add or use TZD, thiazolidinediones, or you can also use sulfonylurea, but remember there will be hypoglycemia risk with SGLT2 inhibitor. And supposing you find heart failure or CKD predominating, particularly heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, means ejection fraction less than 45%, or if you see CKD, specifically GFR 30 to 60 ml per minute, or urine albumin clearance ratio more than 30 milligram, especially more than 300 milligram per gram, then you preferably use SGLT2 inhibitor with evidence of reducing heart failure and or CKD progression in this your cardiovascular outcome trials. If GFR adequate, means here GFR is required more than 30 ml per minute. They are with SGLT2, they are with SCVD, GFR was required more than 45 ml. But here with hypertension and CKD, GFR is required more than 30 ml only. You have to remember these two things separately. They are more than 45, but here more than 30. If SGLT2 not tolerated or contraindicated, or if GFR is less than adequate, then add GLP-1 receptor agonist with proven CVD benefit. And in spite of this, if A1C is above the target, then avoid this TZD, thiazolidinediones, in the setting of heart failure, because there is risk of water retention and weight gain. if you use this. So choose agents demonstrating CV safety. So for patients on SGLT2 inhibitor, consider adding GLP-1 receptor agonist with proven CVD benefits. So you understood that these two can be combined together for proven CVD benefits, very important. Or you can add DPP-4 inhibitor except saxagliptin because heart failure risk, and DPP-4 inhibitor can't be combined with GLP-1 receptor agonist because GLP-1 receptor agonist rapidly degraded by DPP-4 inhibitor. Or then you can also add or use basal insulin, but remember there is risk of hypoglycemia with SGLT2 inhibitor, so given reducing doses. Then you can add, if not the target achieved, you can use sulfonylurea. But here also you have to remember hypoglycemia risk increases with SGLT2 inhibitor, but it can be given in reduced doses. Now you have to understand three things. Number one, in SCVD, SGLT2 causes osmotic diuresis and natriuresis, leading to decreased blood pressure, decrease in arterial stiffness, and decrease in vascular resistance, and decrease in body weight, and decrease in uric acid, and decrease in oxidative stress. And in CKD, SGLT2 inhibitor reduces hyperfiltration in type 1 diabetes mellitus, and in type 2 diabetes causes transient acute reduction in GFR followed by progressive recovery and stabilization of renal function. Lastly, you understand in heart failure, SGLT2 inhibitor by lowering blood pressure reduces preload and afterload of left ventricle, hence benefit failing heart. Now I would like to tell you GLP-1 receptor agonist and SGLT2 inhibitor give protection to a broad range of pathophysiologic defects associated with type 2 diabetes mellitus. So here, first we take the GLP-1 receptor agonist. GLP-1 receptor agonist work by stimulating the release of insulin by pancreas after eating, even before sugar starts to rise. Never forget. It works by stimulating the release of insulin by pancreas after eating, even before sugar starts to rise. It decreases appetite, increases insulin secretion, decreases blood pressure, increases natriuresis, and decreases inflammation and slow gastric emptying. Then SGLT2 inhibitor, it works by reducing renal tubular glucose reabsorption without insulin release. It does not release insulin, but it reduces renal tubular glucose reabsorption. That matlab sugar is passed in the urine. It helps in that. And it reduces the diabetes. It decreases urinary glucose excretion, decreases blood pressure, and decreases vascular stiffness. And these two, both 1 and 2, decrease blood glucose, decrease blood pressure, and decrease body weight. So here you see sodium glucose co-transporter prevents absorption of the glucose in renal tubules, and glucose is excreted in the urine, and it helps in diabetes control. And now you can see the in renal tubules pump, pipe, and filters. Pump is major adverse cardiac events, and pipes are hypertensive heart failure, and filters are renal disease. SGLT2 should now be considered a first-line therapy after metformin in most people with type 2 diabetes. This is by the Lancet, Sabatini and colleague. Meta-analysis provides compelling evidence. So don't forget that this sodium glucose cotransporter prevents reabsorption of filtered glucose by the renal tubules. Hence, the glucose is passed in the urine and diabetes is reduced. Now, what is cardiac resynchronization therapy? It's well established heart failure treatment for patients with broad QRS duration, improving left ventricular function, reducing heart failure symptoms, and improving long-term prognosis. In addition, CRT has demonstrated to be associated with improvement of the renal function. Now, SGLT2 inhibition improves hemodynamic parameters in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus, leading to a cardiorenal protection and heart failure protection. Remember, 68% of patients who had type 2 diabetes for 5 years showed signs of left ventricular dysfunction. And second point you have to remember, up to 40% of the patients with type 2 diabetes who were diagnosed with heart failure died within 5 years. Now, SGLT2 inhibitor causes in heart decreases preload and afterload, decrease cardiac wall stress, increase cardiac efficiency in output and in circulation, decrease plasma volume, decrease arterial stiffness, decrease blood pressure and increases hematocrit. And for like this, it improves glycosuria, diuresis and natriuresis. And in kidney, it decreases glucose and sodium reabsorption. And it decreases intraglomerular pressure, decreases intrarenal renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system activity, decreases hyperfiltration, decreases inflammation, hypoxia. And cardiorenal protection means increases cardiac function, increased renal function, improved clinical outcome with decreased CV outcome, decreased heart failure hospitalization, stabilization of the GFR and decreased albuminuria. Now, practical considerations regarding common adverse events associated with SGLT2 inhibitors. There can be genital mycotic infections, so it is more common among women and uncircumcised men. So reinforce perineal hygiene, and it is treatable with topical or single dose oral antifungal therapy, and rarely it needs to interrupt SGLT2 inhibitors. It may produce hypoglycemia, which is rare and seen with concurrent use of insulin or sulfonylureas. It may produce diabetic ketoacidosis, may occur at lower than normal glucose level, that is euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. So prompt medical attention should be given, like polyuria, polydipsia, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, confusion. And it may cause lower extremity amputation. It is increased in those with prior amputations, and here diabetic podiatry care is advised. Now, what are the closing comments? From glucose-centric, we are entering in the new era, patient-centric approach. Choose medications to assist patient in avoiding major comorbidities associated with diabetes. From glucose-centric, that is focused only in reducing sugar, we are entering in patient-centric, means attention to diet, exercise, preventive care measures, drug adherence and self-monitored blood glucose. This will slow progression of disease associated with diabetes, for example renal, cardiovascular and heart failure, and cerebrovascular also. The right treatment for the right patient is, if type 2 diabetes and ischemic heart disease is seen, you use either GLP-1 receptor agonist or SGLT2 receptor inhibitor. If you see type 2 diabetes and heart failure, use either GLP-1 receptor agonist or SGLT2 inhibitor. If you see type 2 diabetes and transient ischemic attack or ischemic strokes, use GLP-1 receptor agonist more than the SGLT2 inhibitor. If you see type 2 diabetes and peripheral artery disease, use GLP-1 receptor agonist more than the SGLT2 inhibitor. Now, to think of when starting SGLT2, often observed clinical effects. First, reduced need for diuretics and decreased dose of SGLT2 inhibitor. C. Hypotension, C. Thrust, C. Diuresis increases until glucose level reduced, but still effective. Weight reduction in first year seen, but then it is stabilized. Initial increase in creatinine level seen, but not afterwards. Candida genital infection seen less often if treated once. You should be aware of previous ketoacidosis, peripheral artery diseases with ongoing ulcers and previous amputations. Stop if illness or if dehydration and during anesthesia. During anesthesia means during surgery, you have to stop it 4 days earlier, because in that case there will be this your there will be actually decreased amount of the food will be given, and that may cause euglycemic ketoacidosis. Type 1 diabetes, if present, there is increased risk of ketoacidosis, but more stable glucose levels are there. But used when insulin above, when insulin alone does not provide adequate glycemic control. So, insulin is used when adequate glycemic control is not there. Then fifth is the Fournier's gangrene. It is increased risk associated with diabetes. Then amputation risk also with diuretics. So use diuretics cautiously. There should not be dehydration or hypotension. Now the last but not the least, conclusion. Diabetes is one of the many risks associated with CVD and increases cardiovascular morbidity and cerebrovascular morbidity and mortality, independently of other factors. Comprehensive management and satisfactory control of each of these risk factors are necessary to prevent adverse outcomes. Lifestyle modification undoubtedly provides an effective approach at low cost and therefore should remain a first-line intervention in all such patients. Recent evidence suggests that adequate glycemic control can achieve reduction of macrovascular, that is ischemic heart disease, stroke and peripheral vascular diseases, and microvascular, that is retinopathy, nephropathy and neuropathy complications. Reducing CV morbidity and mortality in patients with diabetes is a real challenge worldwide, even more in subcontinent. A comprehensive surveillance system to identify CV risk factors is an invaluable public health research tool, not only for monitoring population health status, but also for guiding resource allocation and implementing policy, identifying a prioritizing interventions for at-risk population. So now we have come to the end of the conclusion. What to take home message? This is the last slide. What to take home message is: number 1, trial support SGLT2 inhibitor in HCVD plus diabetes, benefits are more than the potential harms. Then guidelines, European Society of Cardiology, even in inexperienced patients, start with SGLT2 inhibitor or GLP-1 receptor agonist. And American Diabetes Association and European Association for the Study of Diabetes, if heart failure or CKD, start with SGLT2 inhibitor. Additional benefits in heart failure, in weight reduction and in high BP versus other treatments, for example in SCVD also seen. Good and timely for cardiologists and physicians to know, now consider and educate and improve their clinical practices. Lastly, so bring your best players like SGLT2 inhibitor and best games, because there is some good defense awaiting outside in the field. Thank you friends for your kind attention on in the CME of diabetes and cardiovascular diseases in India and the new approach of diabetes management from cardio center to patient center. I thank you again for your kind attention.